Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ingrid and this is Ingrid Reads a Lot. For today's video, I wanted to go over all of the books that I read in the beginning of this year because I'm still doing this catch-up game with YouTube and I figured I still want to tell you guys what I read because I've read some amazing things and I've read some not amazing things. I have some books that are very popular and I did not like, and some books that I really loved. So without further ado, let's get started. I don't know why I'm being weird, but alas, here we are. Should I start like just in reading order or not, or favorite to least favorite? You know what, we're gonna do this in reading order so you guys can figure out where my mind was at with these books. I feel like this shirt kind of makes me look like a pirate because it has like poofy sleeves. Let's get started with this. I'm just like all over the freaking place. First book. So the beginning of this year I wanted to read something fun, right? Like for the first book of the year I wanted to read fun, nothing too serious because I was going on vacation. So mind you, I'm listening to these books as I'm getting ready for my vacation. So I picked up A Tongue So Sweet and Deadly by Sophia St. Germain. And I would like to say that I feel like a lot of these romantasy books have like weird titles. A Tongue So Sweet and Deadly. But here's the thing, I actually was enjoying this book a lot when I first read it because we have our main character and she is part fae and she lives in this world where the humans and the fae live separately but they're aware of each other, and our main character has some sort of like connection to the king, and as the reader you don't know what this connection is, but at the very beginning of this book our main character owns a bar and she just wants to help her people, and she's just going on about her life when the king tells her she needs to infiltrate the human elections and spy for him. And so that's where we start off. And she also has a very broody guard type person because he works for the king also. And you know, they have that enemies type thing where we all know where that's going. But that's where this book starts, and I actually really enjoyed it. One, because our main character is like in her 30s and not barely pushing 19 like most of romantasy books nowadays, where you know they're doing all these crazy things and they're like barely out of their teenage years, which I'm always questioning that, you know, whatever. I can suspend my disbelief, but I enjoyed this. I thought it was like a little bit of a breath of fresh air with this character being a little bit older. I really quite enjoyed this first book. There is a little bit of a love triangle going on and it's not annoying, like it's done well, and I loved it so much so that I gave it a 4 stars, and I started the second book right away. And that book is called A Promise So Bold and Broken by the same author, Sophia St. Germain. And this is where it all broke down for me because this second book was very boring. There was no other word to tell you to describe this book because nothing happens, and it's like 458 pages long. We do find out some reveals at the very end, and I felt like it was cheapened by the entirety of the second book because you're just kind of there with the character as she's like figuring things out. And then I can't tell you too much without spoiling anything, but basically there's like a travel element to this where they're like running away, and I was just bored. There were parts of this book that I enjoyed. Like I think we get to know some other characters that are introduced, and it's kind of like this new group of friends, and I liked that part. I always like kind of like found family type things, but at the very end of this I kind of was disheartened, and so I decided to DNF the series, and I gave this first book a 2.5 stars. And then because I was kind of upset with the fantasy element of my beginning of the year, I decided to jump headfirst into some horror, and I picked up Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. This was kindly gifted to me by my best friend Shauna as a birthday gift, and I will say that I adore Rachel Harrison. She's one of my favorite horror authors currently writing, and I tend to like a lot of her books. This one is about our main character Cleo and her sisters. At the very beginning of this novel, Cleo finds out that her mom has just passed and they inherited the house that they grew up in, but the house was possessed when they were there as kids. Cleo decides to renovate the house and flip it so she can make some money. Cleo's also an influencer and she's living this like seemingly perfect life. But Cleo our character is a child of chaos, and I love that because she decides to just blow everything up and really confront her family about what was going on back then, because she was the youngest, and so her memories of the events of this haunted house are fuzzy, and no one really talks about it. They didn't have any contact with their mom when she was still alive, and nobody in the family talks about it. They just like sweep things under the rug, and Cleo just comes around to basically shatter all that perfect veneer. I love Rachel Harrison's writing because she really tends to write very good female characters and people that you can relate to, and I liked that she explored like the sisterly relationship between these three characters. And also, there were some very fun, scary times in this with the haunted house. There's some very quotable moments in this. I tabbed a lot of this book, and I love some of the quotes in this. So, one of my favorite quotes is, I thought this was very funny. It is, I do remember, but the easiest way to tell who a man really is to injure his ego and see how he reacts. And I'm like, girl, she really is a child of chaos. And I loved it. And I really loved this book. And I gave it a 5 stars because it was basically everything I was looking for, something fun, but also meaningful and thoughtful and explores different themes. And I adored this. Rachel Harrison for the win, as always, because I really do tend to love her books. I gotta pause for a coffee break because I need it. Okay, and because horror did so well for me with Play Nice, I decided why not read some more horror that has really good reviews. And that's when we lost some of the plot, and I read We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. This premise of this book is undoubtedly one of my faves, right? So I'll tell you. So basically, our main character and her wife or girlfriend buy a house, and they are fixing up the house to sell it. One night, the main character is at home by herself, and someone knocks on the door, and they go, it's a whole family, mom, dad, kids, and they go, oh, we used to live here. Can we come in and see the house? And people pleaser that our main character is, she lets them in. And I'm thinking to myself, have you never watched a scary movie in your entire life, lady? You don't let strangers in your house at night, ever. You know, that's where this book takes off. And the thing is, I thought this was going to be so good because it had so much potential to go different ways and, you know, like psychological type thing, or even like, I don't know, anything other than what it actually was, which was very difficult to follow and confusing. And the thing is, I did question, is it the book or is it that I'm too stupid to understand the book? And I don't think that's the case, right? I don't think that's the case because I have been expanding my horizons when it comes to horror, and there are some books that are weird and I like them, right? So this is not because this book is just weird. It's because the beginning of the book sets up a bunch of things. Like the very beginning of this is very readable, quick read, and scary. Like the basement scene, if you read this, you know. And it sets up a lot of things, but it at the end it like doesn't explain anything. And I don't like that. I don't like that in movies. I don't like that in books when things are just left out in the open and no one tells me why. The thing, I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say this might be spoilers a little bit, so beware if you want to read this book. This goes in like a multiverse type thing, which was not what I was expecting. And then it goes into that, like, what is even real? What's even reality? And I just don't like that stuff in books and movies. And so that's why I didn't like this. And I gave it a 2.5 stars. I also should say that I read this I listened to this on audio because by the time I was reading this, I was already on vacation. And great vacation read, by the way. Very scary. I listened to this on audio, and there's some parts of the audiobook that is like these little beeping type things, and I thought it was just like to add like pizzazz to the book, and it's not. I found out that it's actually Morse code, and you can go and look up what the Morse code was saying. And I also found out that this book was originally a subreddit like type story on, I think the subreddit or the Reddit thread is no sleep. So I think it was started in Reddit as like a scary story, I think. And then the author like expanded and made this book. I also saw someone talking about this, that it like adds a lot of context if you read the subreddit. Not that I'm lazy, but now it's too much work. Like I need to understand a book in the time that the book is like the pages that are in the book, right? I don't want to do all this extra work of like looking up Morse code and reading some subreddit and like too much. And maybe I'm just lazy. And if you loved this, I'm sorry that I'm trashing your book, but I didn't like it. I don't know what else to say. I'm allowed to not like something, okay, people? I know this is such a beloved book, and I was like, oh, I feel bad that I didn't like this, but I just didn't. And in my humble opinion, you have the amount of the book to make me understand the book. And if it doesn't, then that's not on me. I don't want to read a subreddit, and I don't want to translate Morse code on the side. And that's about it. And that's it. I gave this a 2.5 stars. I still think that this author has a lot of potential, especially in the horror genre, because those beginning parts were very scary. And I'm probably going to read more from this author to see if the book is what I didn't like or if it's the author in general. But yes, We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. I'm sorry I didn't like it. And then we keep going into the abyss because I also read The Compound by Aileen Rowell. That's how you say her name, I believe. And this is a premise that I also thought this book was going to be very good. The premise is that we have Survivor meets Love Island meets horror meets whatever else you want to add in there, because this is a genre blend of a book. And basically, this is like a dystopian novel also. We have our main character, and she wakes up in this house where she signed up for this reality show that you have to do things in order to get basic needs met, right? So in order to get food, they have to do certain things. In order to get, like, I don't know, comforts and things like that. And it's like men and women put in this house, and you're just following along with the main character. And we get these like glimpses of what the world is actually like. And that's why you get the perception that this is like very dystopian, because the current world in our character's perspective is not doing well. And so she wants to stay in this compound forever. The problem I had with this book is that it had potential to go in a direction where it could go like very horror. And I was expecting that, right? I was expecting, like, you know, I was listening to this and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to happen. And it doesn't. It almost like what I kept thinking of is like, it keeps going, like it gets to the cliff and then it just doesn't jump off. And I wanted it to jump off and it doesn't. And it's very boring. Again, very meh. And I don't, very like just boring. Things don't happen. It like, you're reading and you think this is gonna happen and it never does, and you're just in this character's head as she's like trying to figure out what to do to stay in this house. And all the characters sort of lose their humanity, but not enough to like get like gory or anything like that. I don't know, maybe this one was me because I kept expecting it to go more and it just doesn't. I gave this 2.5 stars also because very mid. And I don't know, I was kind of upset because this also has lots of good reviews, and I just was hoping it would go a certain direction and it didn't. But again, like, who am I to say what direction a book has to go in, right? So that's The Compound by Aileen Rowell. I think that's how you say her name. All right. And then this next book I picked up because I saw that Wuthering Heights, the adaptation, was coming out with one of my favorite actresses. I really like, what's her name? I just blanked out for a second, guys. I swear I'm like not this slow. Margot Robbie. And I had never read the classic, and I didn't know what it's about, honestly. Like, I have never been spoiled up for this book, and I wanted to pick it up before I watched the adaptation because this was before the whole controversy came out about how, you know, they're like not following. The adaptation is basically not a real adaptation of this book because it's in quotations, and that's what the director said. And I'm sure you have seen the controversy going around. If you want to watch anything about this controversy, I can link a couple videos down below that I've seen people talk about this because I've watched it. I didn't watch the movie, but I watched videos on the controversy because I read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and spoiler, I loved this. I think this book is so good and done so well, and there's so many different aspects of this book that can be explored, And I found that this is so, like, no one in this book, none of the characters are likable, and they're all horrible people, right? They're all out for themselves, most of them. And they just keep going in this cycle of trauma and they can't get themselves out of it. And that made me really want to do some research on Emily Bronte and her family. I know the other sisters also wrote books because this was written, I think, in 1874, if I'm not mistaken. I wrote it down. Please hold. What? 1847, this book was written. And I was so surprised that something so dark was written back then. And I guess I shouldn't be, because humans are humans, doesn't matter what year they're in. But I was even more surprised that this was written by a woman, because at the time, I ended up doing a lot of research on the historical period and how women were meant to behave and things like that. And I'll tell you, it's not like this. It's not this, but I just love it. I love women breaking cycles and doing things that they want to do and writing dark books that they want to write. And this is the story of Catherine and Heathcliff. If you don't know, I'm not going to spoil it because I can't believe I wasn't spoiled for this before. But Heathcliff is a person of Romani descent, is what we learn in the beginning of the book. And her Catherine's father brings him around and raises him as a son. And that causes all sorts of conflict in the family between the father and Kathy and her other brother. They sort of developed this codependency, Kathy and Heathcliff. We're hearing this book from Mr. Lockwood, which is someone that rents the house. It's like you're hearing this perspective of people like basically gossiping about the life of Heathcliff. Keep in mind that this is also an unreliable narrator, right? Because we're hearing this story from the perspective of Mrs. Dean, who is a servant of this house, and her and Mr. Lockwood are talking about Heathcliff and what happened to him, things like that. And that's where this novel starts. I feel like what a lot of people are critiquing the movie about is the fact that the movie, even when I first watched the preview, it very much looks like a love story, right? It looks like this like yearning between Heathcliff and Kathy, and it's really not what this book is about. Like there is a codependent relationship in there, and a very much like toxic relationship in there, but this is not a love story. I don't care what you tell me. But anyway, I still loved it, even though everyone sucks in here, and I was here for it. And I was also very pleasantly surprised that I was sort of intimidated to read this at first because it is a classic, and I thought I wasn't going to understand and keep up with the language. And that is so far from the truth, because it makes sense that classics become classics for a reason, and because they're like stories that a lot of people relate to and engage with. And I will say that this opened up my horizons for some classics. And next up, I read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This was written before Emily Bronte wrote her books, and this is very much about Regency era aristocracy, and it is sort of a satire. It's sort of very witty in parts, even though this is a love story. The characters are not just airheads, which is what most people think of Regency era women. And I think it is also like a critique on the way women were treated at the time, is even by their parents and things like that. I absolutely adored this, and I loved this love story and how witty Jane Austen was. And reading both of these books made me want to read more from especially Jane Austen. I think I want to read Emma next from her, but sadly Emily Bronte only wrote the one book. But there are other books by her sisters that I do want to read and like see the differences. I do want to read more from her sisters, more from Jane Austen. I adored both of these books. I did give Pride and Prejudice a higher rating. I gave it 5 stars, and I think I gave Wuthering Heights a 4.5, I think, because I only took half a star off for enjoyment. This book is a very dark read, by the way, and while I was reading it, I was very aggravated with all the characters and the choices they kept making. Loved both of these books, and I can see why they're classics. Next, I decided to read some sci-fi. Have you guys noticed a theme here? I literally jump between genres that I get like sick of. Not that I get sick of it, but like I jump between genres to keep things interesting, because if I just read the same genre over and over and over again, it gets boring for me. So Next up, I read 3 sci-fi books in a row. First, I read Exiles by Mason Coyle. This is a new horror novel. I think it was just released recently, maybe in February. I'm not sure. But I saw the recommendation on Kayla's channel, Books and Lala. It sounded really interesting. We have 3 people that are going to be the first people to go to Mars to live there. And right before they arrive, some robots are sent to get everything ready, and when the humans get there, things did not go to plan. It looks very messy when they get there, and they're trying to figure out what happened. This explores themes of humanity and what it means to be human in a dark setting, in a horror setting. This is very gory. It's a short book also. I think it only has like 270 pages, and it's extremely readable. I gave this a 4.5 stars. I really loved this, and the closed door mystery type thing of this book really makes you like be at the edge of your seat, because it is so contained to this like small compound in Mars, and the contrast between like the expanse that is a uninhabited planet and just a small contained area that these 3 people are in. It was just so good, and I loved it. And I was sad to find out that the author of this book has already passed. I think his wife published his last book. He has another one. It's called William. It's another horror book that I think I'm going to check out also. But I love this book. And then the next 2 sci-fi books I read were 2 novellas, and I'm continuing on the murder bot train, and I read Exit Strategy and Rogue Protocol. Rogue Protocol is before Exit Strategy. I think these are novellas 3 and 4. And again, we're with our main character, Murderbot, as he's trying to figure out this big company that is in it for the money and harming people along the way. And he's trying to find proof to bring back to his human friends. And I really love this. And the thing is, I have seen some critique of this series that people find it very boring. It's very like episodic, right? These short novellas. It's like watching an episode of a show that you like. But I think the fun of this series is being in Murderbot's head and seeing how he views the world, and seeing him evolve and have feelings for these people that he originally like cared nothing for, and him coming to terms with these feelings. And I just adore being in his head. So I think if you've read the first novella and you don't like Murderbot, you won't like the rest of the series, in my humble opinion. There is a lot of action going on in these short novellas, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not really about the action. It's more about the character. And I love these. I gave Rogue Protocol, I think I gave that a 4.5, and I gave Exit Strategy a 5. And the only reason was because in Exit Strategy, we're back with our humans and sort of getting more of that like emotional interaction with that Murderbot is having with them. And in Rogue Protocol, we're still back in space, I should say, not with the people. Murderbot is trying to figure some things out. And yeah, I am definitely going to keep going in the series. I think the next book is Network Effect, and that I think is a full-length novel. But yeah, I love Murderbot, and I also watched the TV show, which is very good on Apple TV. Murderbot for the win. The next book I read was a romantasy or romance fantasy romance. It's called A Dawn of Onyx by Kate Golden. This actually doesn't have a lot of, I don't even think it has any spice, but it's a book that I read and I don't remember a lot of it. It was just kind of boring. And I feel bad saying this, but I don't recall much about this book. I read it because I had seen, I think online, someone like raving about the series. So I figured, I feel like reading something fun. Let me pick this up. And our main character, Arwen, is captured by the king's forces because she's saving her brother. And she is brought to the king's kingdom. She's in prison there. In the whole book, you're kind of like following Arwen around as she's like gets to know people, and it figures out that the world is a much bigger and complex place than she thought originally, because she's a healer and she just kind of worked in her small village with her mom, I think, healing people, and obviously she has magic that people are not allowed to know about. This felt very one-dimensional, very much, I've read this story before countless times, And usually I don't mind that if I vibe with the characters and their love and things like that, but this did not happen in this book. It just felt kind of boring. And I'm not going to keep going with this series. I think I gave this, let's see, I gave this a 3.3 stars, and it wasn't terrible. And it wasn't good either. So it's very much like 3 stars for me is very like forgettable. And I just didn't vibe with this. I thought it was okay. And that is like a death sentence in my book. Okay, next up, we read Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. This is a literary fiction. It's about our main character, Lillian. This is a very heartwarming novel about Lillian, who's our main character, and her friend Madison. Madison and her were friends when they were in boarding school, but they haven't spoken in like 10 years. Madison calls her up because she needs her help to watch her boyfriend Senator's kids, and she's gonna get paid a lot of money if she does this. But the catch is that these kids, they randomly self-combust and they catch on fire. And no one can know because this guy, I think he's actually not a senator yet. I think he's running for some sort of political seat. And they kind of don't want the world to know about this. And this is a very lovely novel about family and found family and acceptance, and just really good and really like heartwarming. I texted Jashana, was the one that recommended this, and she thought I texted her being like, I love these little fiery bastards. Like the family dynamics in this is just so good, and between Lillian and the kids, heartwarming. And I just loved this book, and it's a very short read, so if you want something that will warm your heart, read Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. All right, and last but certainly not least, we're going to end off with a banger that I absolutely adored, and I will tell you I gave it 5 stars, and that was, let me pick it up. Gosh, this is hard when you're trying to film things and make them like seamless and then things don't cooperate. Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is another book that I got as gift for my birthday from Shoshana, along with Play Nice, and I loved this. Me and Taylor Jenkins Reid have like a sordid past because I really loved The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but I did not like Daisy Jones and the Six. And I think I also read One True Loves, which I felt very meh about. So I picked this up because I love space and astrophysics and things like that. And I thought I would like this because it's about our main character, Joan. And this is set in the 80s when the first women astronauts were allowed to be astronauts. But this is also a love story between Joan and another female astronaut. At the very beginning of this book, it's not a spoiler, you know that something has gone terribly wrong. And part of the reason I loved this book was because the whole time I was reading it and getting to know these characters and seeing Joan's love story, and also like this found family aspect of between Joan and the other astronauts, you know something horrible is happening because we keep going back and forth in the timeline. And it just like the whole time you're reading this, I like had my heart in my hands because I just knew something horrible was happening. So I love this. I think this is definitely Taylor's best book to date, but I have not read Carrie Soto's Back because that's another thing I love is tennis, and I think I will like that book too. I loved this and I gave this a 5 stars, and I cried. This book had lots of themes to be explored, and one of the characters that I absolutely despised was Joan's sister. Oh my god, if you've read this book, you know. Obviously that was on purpose, but I hated her with all my guts, and Joan is just like too nice for this world. I think I read some really good books in the beginning of this year, as you can see from this video. But yeah, I hope that the trend continues for the rest of the year. March has not been kind to me. I feel like I've read a lot of very meh books. There's been some good ones, but I will do a separate March wrap up because now I'm up to date after this video. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've read any of these, or from listening to me blabber about these books, if you have any recommendations for other books for me. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. Goodbye.